Hello, I'm Paul Menace. Welcome to Studio SX. I'm a co-chair of the Digital Media and Entertainment Practice at Duval and Stackenfeld in Los Angeles. And this is Mathieu Bitton, who is a personal manager, art director, and all-around music passion person. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm good.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the passion that's usually involved in being successful in the music industry. And you developed this very early on when you were a teenager.
Yeah, actually, I think I remember buying my first record around maybe 7 years old, and something hit me. It was an Ennio Morricone record, 45, and then, later came Ray Charles and Cat Stevens, all these great, and I developed a passion back then for the music, but the artwork as well.
And this was in France?
This was in Paris, France, yeah. I was born and raised in Paris, and really came to America to follow this passion. I mean, my mother had moved to Los Angeles. I was in boarding school in France, and basically, when she said, you can come to America, I knew that I could come to work, in the music business, so.
So what was your first entree into the music business?
The very first gig, well, the way I got into the business, I started out while I was going to NYU, I had to come up with money to live in New York and to basically, pay for bills and help pay for school. And so I created a portfolio of all kind of like a con artist, like a fake Prince cover, a fake Rolling Stones, all these things that I thought, oh, this would look cool, like, as an album cover. And I came to a job interview for a job that was $9 an hour right near NYU, a place called Gray and Gustafson. And I remember the guy saying, God, you're so passionate. I realized none of these things are real, but we like, normally we want somebody who's got tear sheets and this and that, but all right, we'll hire you for $9 an hour. So that was for a gig doing mostly retail, but eventually I met someone who introduced me to, I started managing a band, called Sky Juice out of Montreal. And I basically evolved into this thing where I met this woman who had a label called Loose Cannon at Mercury, Polygram in New York, and she was putting out Red Fox reissues and Richard Pryor, and had a bunch of current hip-hop acts. And I did the logo. That was my very first logo, and it was for a label at Mercury. And then she introduced me to a now dear friend of mine named Harry Weinger, and he and I had this crazy passion for funk and soul music, and he ran the catalog at Polygram. Then when Universal bought Polygram, he was in charge of Motown, and so the very first job I got was for him on a real CD. It was for the Funk Essentials series. And I remember saying, are you actually paying me for this? Because I would have done it for free, and I couldn't believe I was getting paid for doing it.
And you did all the artwork for
I did the
CD?
artwork, and then little by little, when they saw, the passion is the word that comes to me all the time. I had worked on something with Harry Belafonte, and he signed this book that I worked on black film posters, and half the comments on there say, thank you for your passion, what a passion, God, the passion, and because I do ignite when, these certain, there's a lot of things I'm passionate about, but that was my foray, into it. And it was completely passion-driven, so it's appropriate.
So you didn't have a plan going into the music industry where you wanted to do a particular thing?
No, not at all.
Knew you wanted to be a manager or anything
I
of that
started
kind?
as a manager, but I realized quickly that was babysitting, and that it was truly a thankless job. And the band I managed was fantastic, but it was a thing. I was really young. I was in school, and whenever I did something or they got on the radio or somebody else would take the credit for it, and I got really frustrated. So then I decided, okay, I'm making money doing design when I started doing work for Polygram, and then it was like a virus. So other people would see the work, word of mouth. I started doing projects with artists I was very passionate about, like Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, all these things. I collected all these records, so it was surreal, truly surreal.
I also understand you collected a lot of movie posters from the 50s to the 70s, a lot of blaxploitation types
Black
of films.
film posters. That started when I was a kid, and I went to the Latin Quarter in Paris. There was a Disney. It was like 101 Dalmatians and Fox and the Hound, or Coffee, the Mac, and Superfly, triple threat thing. I saw Pam Grier with the cleavage and the shotgun, and I was snuck into the no one under 18. I must have been 7 or 8.
That's an interesting juxtaposition, Pam Grier and Minnie Mouse.
Yeah, yeah. And it changed my life forever. And then eventually when I started making money, I started buying the posters. And, my then girlfriend, now wife, Rebecca, actually bought me my first really valuable poster, first Christmas together. So I was like, okay, I'm going to marry her.
Must have been a heck of a poster.
It was Superfly. It was an original Superfly poster. And I had other things, but this was the pièce de résistance, And then it became like a disease, truly, where I became consumed with. I had the same thing with records, but posters are much more expensive than records. And it was the 70s, and then as I'm getting older, became the 60s, the Sidney Poitier films, Harry Belafonte film, and then it got really dangerous, and it became Carmen Jones, Orfeo Negro, all the Eartha Kitt films, and then this is why I have no savings account.
Although that's not a bad thing to invest in. I mean, considering how the economy is now, the return on those things might be a whole lot better than any alternative.
I hope you said that clear so my wife can hear that.
Rebecca, it's true. And from there, you told me you met Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, I had the opportunity. Yeah, I'll try to make the story short, but I decided to start doing a poster book on blaxploitation films. And somebody told me Quentin Tarantino was doing one. Long story short, came out to LA, convinced these guys that I should work on this book, which came out. It's called What It Is, What It Was. Instead of my book, I joined them and did their book, and met Quentin at the very first screening of Jackie Brown. I got to meet Pam Grier. I honestly felt like I had died. I mean, I met a lot of people, but Pam Grier, I was salivating like a fool. And it was amazing. I was just drooling. But so then I met Quentin, and he and I, were just talking like two idiots about this stuff, just really excited about these films and the posters, and then I started doing film posters for his company, and so it was great. I mean, 100% passion, over and over, passion-driven, turning into real jobs.
So you guys were basically kindred spirits, because he always had a passion for...
Oh, no, and he has, Legend of Nigger Charlie poster on his walls, and, Hell Up in Harlem, and, so we were the same, except he had a lot more money than I did, and still does. And, so he could afford to buy 100 posters at a time, and I had to go one by one, which I prefer personally, because I'd sit with it, and, But then that, amazingly, inspired me to become an art director. And really, I mean, to actually look at everything, at the art and everything. And, I grew up in Paris. My dad collected Josephine Baker posters, and it was all statues of jazz musicians by an artist named Goldscheider. I mean,
sure.
So I grew up with this, as a little kid, seeing all this imagery of, black musicians. And that didn't hit me till last year, where somebody said, well, what is it with you and all this stuff? And I said, I don't know. Well, come to think of it, as a little kid, that's what was all around. Louis Armstrong posters, so I thank him for that,
So your passion led you to do art direction and posters for Tarantino for a while?
Yeah, I did a few of those. A movie called Sonatine. I worked with a guy named Jerry Martinez, who was the author of the book. Then we did a poster for The Beyond. I did some stuff on Jackie Brown for them. And, it was just wonderful. And I've done a lot of film soundtrack work since then. And I've gotten to design posters, and it's just fun. It's like this funny cycle,
Well, one thing just leads to another.
And it's the same with the records. I've ended up working on a lot of, deluxe editions and reissues of records and Marvin Gaye records, and like recently for the Hippo Select label, hipposelect.com, been doing these dream projects. It's the same thing where I have this collection of records, and now they're in the CDs. You open it up, and it's like, here's my 45s I bought in Japan, here's the ones I bought in Germany, here's the one I bought when eBay started, And same thing with this Ultimate Prince project I did, which was the ultimate dream project, because Prince is the reason, I was such a fan. And my friend, she said, try to do this interview without talking about Prince, but I can't. And